Hello, welcome. I'm Dr. Steve Hassan, cult expert, founder and director of Freedom of Mind. It is Wednesday, March 18th, 2026, 10 days to the No Kings 2 massive protests that are being planned in 3,000 cities around the United States. And I know people are going to be protesting around the world against the king, the guy who wants to be king, I should say, the dictator himself, Donald Trump, who is exhibiting more and more signs of cognitive decline and megalomania, and doing everything he can to divert from the Epstein files and the information that's coming out about him perpetrating against underage girls. And I posted something this morning about the Zorro Ranch from a UK publication, The Telegraph. I didn't see anything in AP or the New York Times or the Boston Globe or etc., the US press. But there's so much to talk about. But I want to just start by saying that my whole thing is human rights and anti-authoritarianism and pro-democracy. And I am pretty hopeful, actually, despite all of the craziness that's happening with the attack on Iran. There's so much to talk about. And as my team were explaining to me, people can get their news from other places, but my lane is really explaining psychology and how the mind works and how people can be radicalized and how people can be de-radicalized. So I wanted to start today talking about the fact that we are in World War III. It's psychological warfare and cyber warfare. We now know all of our personal data, us Americans, have been hacked. We had a whistleblower who said that Musk from Doge was uploading our data to a Russian IP address. There was a Doge employee who said he put everything on his thumb drive. So we have a right to be very upset about this attack on our privacy and our free speech. And talking about free speech, there is a proposed merger of with Ellison of Paramount taking over Warner Brothers, which still owns HBO and Paramount, etc. And so there are folks calling for an economic boycott, something that got Jimmy Kimmel back on the air, because there'll be a shareholders meeting of Warner Brothers. And it seems that money talks to a lot of people. And having said that, Trump's America's first agenda, we're not going to be involved with foreign wars. Now he's talking about invading Cuba and other places in addition to Iran. There was a story that Rachel Maddow put out about Saudi Arabia giving $2 billion to Jared Kushner as a pass-through to hire the U.S. military to attack their mortal enemies, Iran. There's a lot of media about Israel influencing Trump to attack Iran, but most Americans, unless they've done their homework, need to understand there are Sunni and Shiite Muslims, and they don't like each other. In fact, they view themselves as enemies. And so why is Qatar and Saudi Arabia, etc., being attacked by Iran? It's because they want to end the Islamist dictatorship that exists in Iran. Unfortunately, Donald Trump is a useful idiot and is doing whatever he's told to do by a variety of different forces. But part of the issue is the different forces have different agendas. And so you'll see him waffling one minute to another. But I want to come back to my central expertise, which is it's your mind and only you should control it. And one of the key principles with psychological warfare is being able to understand that that's what's happening. It isn't just a cult of personality with a deranged leader who's a sexual predator and a malignant narcissist. There are major forces, as I wrote in The Cult of Trump, that have been wanting to dismantle the United States of America. As the Soviet Union collapsed, they want to take us down. And the only difference is we have American DNA. People from all over the world came here for freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, separation of church and state. And that's our strength. And we have states that have powers. So as much as Trump can do a federal pardon of criminals, criminals can still be charged and tried and sentenced and convicted by state governments. And right now, some of our federal justices, some of them Republican, appointed by Republican presidents, including Trump, are saying no to things like RFK saying, don't give, like, let's take away the funding for vaccines, mandatory vaccines for children. There are judges saying, no, this is not right. This is not taking care of our people. So let's come back to the central theme. We need to be in our bodies, in the here and now, understanding my influence continuum, the difference between ethical influence and unethical influence, and how to tell the difference. And if you're going to spend time online, assume things are AI, bots, or deceptions or scams, unless it's coming from a bona fide, recognized authority, someone who has proven themselves, who has the lived experience, who has the academic credentials, who has integrity, who cares about truth telling. And so, for example, what's happening with all the AI flooding the internet right now with AI, we need to spend more time with niches around trustworthy actors, people who are proven to be reliable. And that's something I've endeavored to do for 50 years. I haven't been perfect, but I keep growing and learning, etc. But I have the lived experience being in a cult, having my mind hacked, being a fanatic, getting deprogrammed after a near-fatal van crash. I have the mental health training. I have the authorships. I have 2 masters and a doctorate. But most importantly, I've written books that have changed people's lives just from reading my books like Combating Cult Mind Control, Freedom of Mind, and The Cult of Trump. So what can we do? My prescription is educate yourselves, learn how to regulate your own emotional states, spend time in real life cultivating friendships, be in nature, exercise, sleep 7 to 9 hours, and when you're online, be with your warning antennas wide open, and don't like and share things if you're not knowing who this person is. I see all of these people talking with authority voice, using principles of social psychology, like Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, and claiming that they have the miracle supplements. I fell for one of these scams a few weeks ago, and I did a video about it. But I learned my lesson. I don't need to be scammed over and over and over again. And I want to find trustworthy people and spend my time learning from them and building a wide coalition. And honestly, I look at people who grew up in an authoritarian regime or country like Russia or China. They know what it's like to live in an authoritarian state. They know what it's like to be afraid to speak their minds because they may get arrested or threatened, or their relatives might get threatened. That's what they want to do to us in the United States. So the answer is there's more of us than them. There are people leaving MAGA every single moment now. This whole Iranian thing with the oil prices, with the Fed, there's so many different angles. But what I'm so excited about and why I've been platforming Christian scholars is there are a lot of young people exiting these authoritarian, Christian-esque megachurches where they were looking at their leader as if they could speak to God because they're a prophet or an apostle. And people are leaving and they're waking up and they're going, what was this? And how could I have believed this? And we want a wide welcome mat. I want freedom of mind, all my regular followers and listeners to be supportive and share what worked for you and to build networks around the country, because we know that and there's a voting act that they don't have the votes to pass it, but they want to take away free and fair elections. And that's so critical. Between now and November, we need to do everything in our power to follow the experts who understand elections, who understand the power of state elections. Volunteer for your local election board, support election officials, especially if they're getting threatened or harassed. Get people registered to vote. And I can just say that I really feel like things are turning in a good way. And we can count on Trump and the authoritarians who want to destroy America to cheat. So I know that there are nonprofits that are wargaming this out. If they do this, what do we do, etc. But in the end, it's going to really require, especially in red states, people coming out in massive numbers to vote against any politician that supports the big lies. The big lies that Trump says that he won the 2020 election. He did not. Even Bill Barr said, the guy who's in the Epstein files, former attorney general, who said Russia didn't hack the election when they did. Even he said that Biden won the election. So we need to anchor into a shared factual reality. And all the judges, by the way, I think there was 61 court decisions that said Biden won the 2020 election. That's a line in the sand. And the whole January 6th violent coup attempt, that's a reality, even though they want to make it a fine and an excursion. People know, they could see with their own eyes and ears. There were people who witnessed, people who took videos. It was the videos that convicted a lot of the people that Trump later pardoned. So let's come back to our values, everybody. Do you know what your values are? I can tell you, for me, I believe in rule of law. I believe in human rights, Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the separation of church and state, our protections of improper search and seizure. I'm against the use of our private data that can be weaponized against us. And I just watched a movie. I just flew back from Europe, and I watched a movie called the Nuremberg, and it was all about the first time international governments came together to try the Nazis, and Hermann Goering in particular. And it was really very inspiring is the word, the wrong word, but it was very timely because we're facing a time that parallels it now. And I can just appeal to anyone from Russia who knew what the Nazis did, all the Russians who died fighting the Nazis. We have Nazis in this administration who think it's fine. It's not fine. It's not fine at all. Being against Jews, Muslims, any minority religion is against the American principles of separation of church and state. So, activism, recharge your batteries, sleep, talk to your family and friends, especially if they voted MAGA. Don't ever attack Trump directly. Don't try to argue with facts. Don't try to persuade them. Engage them with rapport and trust, curiosity, and ask them questions. And then be quiet while they think about the answer. Then do a follow-up question, because people will exit themselves. And I'm telling you, people are doubting big time. So let's open up the space for them to change their mind and be welcomed. And so I'm 100% against anyone who calls people names, bad names, because they followed Trump or were MAGA or they followed QAnon. Oh, and I need to cycle back to QAnon for a minute because I was listening to a podcast where somebody was saying that, well, QAnon got it right about the global international conspiracy of trafficking, but this was a psyop. This was a full-fledged Russian psyop involving Michael Flynn and Americans and Christian nationalists using alternate reality gaming. My friend Jim Stewartson, who helped to pioneer alternate reality gaming, educated me about this whole dropping breadcrumbs and getting people to try to problem solve. What was Q talking about? Michael Flynn sued Jim Stewartson for calling him Q and just dropped the lawsuit. Tells you something. He didn't want to open up to deposition and discovery because we have forensic evidence. You can go back and track Twitter to the initial posts of QAnon. There is a global conspiracy of billionaire elites involving trafficking of underage girls. I just posted a thing about the Zorro Ranch and how the federal government, DOJ, stopped the state government from further investigation. There may be bodies of victims buried there, and we have the technology to find the bodies now. We just need to do it. So I'm sure there's more things that I forgot to mention, but I'm telling you, 10 days from now is No King's Day, March 28th. We want record numbers of people, so put it on your calendar. I've shared where to register, where to find out whether your local organizer is. Make signs and get more people to show up. And that will send a message also to people of the world, because Europe is now making an alliance to protect themselves that doesn't include the US, because they understand that Trump has been hacked by Russia. And if you didn't catch my live stream with Craig Unger, author of American Compromat, last Friday. It's on my YouTube, Dr. Stephen Hassan. And please check out my Substack and subscribe. We just posted an article about Ayn Rand and objectivism, which is a heavy influence on libertarianism, and what the tech billionaires who are pushing AI potential destruction are thinking. It's the end of the world anyway. We shouldn't worry about it. The human species is going to go extinct. So let's figure out how to put our consciousness into robots. Like, no, sorry, I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. So those are my opening comments, folks. I'm open to questions and comments, and I'll do my best to answer. Let's see, Niraj Joshi on Substack. I do see the breaking of MAGA, but how do we build community with those who have hurt us, whether it be voting for Trump or abusive behavior when they were believers? It's a really important question, and I can't answer for you. I can tell you what I believe. I can tell you what I think is going to be most helpful, and that is read Combating Cult Mind Control or talk to former cult members who understand brainwashing and mind control. Because if you understand that, and if you understand it's a dissociative disorder and that your loved one's identity got hacked by the cult identity, and understand the person's goodness is still there, you will people need to own up to the pain and suffering they caused, but that's a process. And sometimes it will take months and years. It will be sped up to the extent that other people model who have already come out, who have apologized. I've interviewed Pam Hemphill, for example, who served 2 months for the January 6th attack and who refused the pardon from Trump and said, nope, I was there. I was guilty. I shouldn't have been there. I trusted the wrong people. So how do we forgive somebody? Because we love them. That's the simple answer. And even myself, I may not know somebody to love them, but because it happened to me, I have a high degree of empathy. And contrary to malignant narcissists who are trying to portray empathy as a weakness, I think it's a superpower. It certainly has made me a better therapist, being able to step into people's shoes and feel their pain and figure out where they're stuck and give them tools to how to recover. Carol Mendoza, is Iran war Trump's temper tantrum for not getting his tariffs? Well, that's a possibility. I think, well, first of all, Trump talked about attacking Iran previously in a previous administration. We know that the Epstein files have not been released despite court orders back in December. We know that there are now people coming forward who say he raped me when I was 13 or 14. There are photos, there are videos, and Trump doesn't want us to think about that, because anyone with any morality, any parent who has a child, boy or girl, but especially girls, has no toleration for somebody who abuses underage girls. And we know, just remember the Access Hollywood hot mic tape. We know that Trump's a bad actor. So I think a lot of this war that was planned was really to divert everybody's attention and to try to set things up to declare a national emergency or martial law to federalize the election. That's my guess about what the Iran war is about. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I heard Rachel Maddow talking about Jared Kushner getting $2 billion from the Saudis and asking for more money. And he's the one who's orchestrating this attack on Iran. And yes, we know Israel is doing a lot of the bombing and the terrible things. And don't get me started on Netanyahu as a malignant narcissist who himself is trying to stay out of jail. I've messaged previously about that. Netanyahu is in my book, The Cult of Trump, as in the cult, and siding with Putin and the Russian oligarchs who all have Israeli passports. But keep in mind, Israel has at least half the population that opposes Netanyahu and what's being done to the Palestinians, as there's at least half of the Americans who, more now, who are against Trump. So when we talk about criticizing, let's talk about criticizing Trump and Trump's cronies and Netanyahu and his religious extremist cronies, and not America and not Israel as a totality. Because I think reality is much more complex than that. Let's see. Kathleen Hamlin on Substack. Has anyone else heard the rumor that Netanyahu passed after being treated in a German hospital? I did hear a rumor, and I don't know. But again, what I want to say is that a lot of what World War III is psychological warfare and trying to arouse people emotionally, fear, disgust, anger. And I want facts. I want it reported by entities that have a reputation for fact checking. And so I've just learned to pause before I rush to any reaction. And I want to point out one of the big dangers is something called cognitive bias. Because if you are seeing a post that agrees with your current position, you have a tendency to not think critically about who is this person? What are they saying? Maybe 2/3 of what they're saying is true, and they're putting a little extra twist that's not true in there. And we're human beings. Human beings have survived and thrived because we collaborate, because we trust each other as a fundamental. And the enemies of America and democracy want us to distrust one another. And I say the burden of proof is on the person who's making the extraordinary claim. So let's see the proof that Netanyahu is dead. I don't think that it can last very long if he's actually dead, right? And we'll see. So any more questions out there that you want to run by me? Let's see. Michael, I think it's Michael. How do you approach people with truth when it's theological fundamentalism? Seems different than what you explain as a cult. So my lane is psychology, social psychology, and not theology. There are people, and I've platformed people like Holly Pivik and Douglas Gievert and Kerry Ladner and other Christian scholars who are speaking out against New Apostolic Reformation, speaking out against Falwell and Liberty University, etc. So I want them to take the lead, to have theological discussions. But I can tell you, if you go to freedomofmind.com and download my bite model of authoritarian control, I think my assistant Jim put the influence continuum with it now, because you need the influence continuum as the frame. But if you look at the T, thought control involves simplistic ideologies, black and white, good versus evil, us versus them, very simplistic, very binary. And for me, I think reality is complex. And so anyone who says they know the truth with a capital T, I take a deep breath and say, well, when I was a Moonie, I used to believe the divine principle, which was Moon's Bible, was the truth with a capital T. But since realizing that I was brainwashed and learning about Chinese communist brainwashing, I've learned to have a much more nuanced, scholarly approach to information. And again, the most effective technique is asking good questions and being patient, being silent, waiting for a response, asking a follow-up question. And what doesn't work is logic and facts and arguments attacking the leader, the doctrine, or the policy of whatever the person's in, but talking about other groups, other situations. So, for example, when people ask me for my advice on things and I find out maybe they know about the Nexium cult of Keith Raniere, maybe they saw a documentary on Scientology, I want to know, what do they think is brainwashing is? And it's very interesting to note that people in Trump's orbit claim that the Democrats are brainwashing people. But nobody asks them, can you explain what you mean by brainwashing? Like, what is the methodology that you understand is being deployed? And for me, I keep coming back to Robert J. Lifton's 1961 seminal work, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, and his 8 criteria, which my BITE model is based on, and ask them to think about it. Just think about it. Because if they care, and they care about truth, they will. One more thing before I say answer this next comment. What my understanding is that Russia has been attacking us in America in the progressive left as well as the right to make authoritarian positions, extremist positions that are polarizing. Where, for example, cancel culture. That's one of Lifton's 8 criteria that says if you leave the group, you cease to have the rights to exist. So the left does it and the right does it. I'm against both. It's not okay to take a human being and reduce them to a word or a name or a traitor or whatever. But brainwashers want to do that. They want to create an us versus them out there. And I want people to cultivate a we. We're all human. We need each other. We're on one planet. And no, I don't believe we should go to Mars. I think there is global climate crisis. Look at the extreme weather events that are happening to us individually. I'm at a friend's office because the freak storm on Monday wiped out the internet where I was staying. So I had to come here for this live stream. It's not going to get better, people. We need to go alternative energy and not keep producing more and more oil. But that the fossil fuel countries like Saudi Arabia, etc., they want to keep us dependent on oil, but they have to understand, and this is an analogy I heard, I don't remember who I heard it from, but that it's like we're sitting on a limb of a tree and we're sawing the limb. And we're sitting on the limb, and it's inevitable that we're going to fall and get hurt. Okay, let's see. Gonzo Newton-John, I'm worried Trump will attack the USA to state an emergency so we can't vote. I share your worry. It's not a unique idea. I've been to several nonprofit bipartisan organizations meetings who are dedicated to doing everything we can for free and fair elections. But that's why it's going to be really important that we stay local in human life. And some of our strongest allies are going to be vets who see a draft dodger, Trump, who called people suckers for going into the military, who are not honoring the people who died because of his undeclared attack, right? We need a lot of strong people to step up. And I want to do a shout out to Minnesota for standing up against ICE. And I want to thank Bruce Springsteen, who's going to be doing a tour. He's one of the heroes. Robert De Niro. I'm seeing Jane Fonda speaking out more and more. I want more influencers to come join us. Pick a lane. You don't need to do a million things. Pick one thing that you want to do, that you have a passion for, and just every day contribute. Do something that pushes the ball down the road a little bit more. Are there any more comments or questions? Let's see. Focus Lady, who's a regular. Hi there. When people are first realizing that MAGA tricked them, is the resulting lashing out behavior a behavioral extinction burst? How can we support those lashing out about a failed cult leader? So I'm not sure if I understand what you mean, but my guess is that what you're saying is when people are starting to get angry against how they've been lied to, they may misdirect their anger to you instead of to the cult leader. So I think that's what you're trying to say. And the response is, if you have the psychological fortitude and awareness for them to act out with you, because maybe you're a family member and they feel safe acting out with you, let them blow off some steam and then follow up with, I'm your brother, or I'm your sister. I just care about you. We all made decisions based on the information and experiences we had in the past, but now we know more. And now we get to demonstrate our humanity, that we can change our mind. And the smartest people are also typically the humblest people, because they realize how little in the big scheme of things do we actually understand in a very real way. Very little. And that's part of the beauty of being alive, is that we live in a mystery. We're learning new things every day. We're learning new things about physics. We're learning new things from the Hubble telescope. Let's be like, whoa, that's amazing, instead of like, I know it all, I have the truth, and I'm not going to change my mind no matter what you tell me. I can tell you that people, and now I'm talking as a therapist, people will often lash out at the people they feel safe to lash out to. So not a stranger, but somebody in their own home, even though it hurts. And when people really get that their mind was hacked, that they were lied to, and they trusted the wrong individuals, they feel ashamed, they feel embarrassed, they get angry. And as a therapist, when one of my clients starts expressing anger that the cult leader lied, or that the cult leader was having sex with underage girls, it's a very healthy sign, because it's an injustice. We should be angry at people who are criminals, who are harming people. We should protect our children. Let's see, Sweet Chopper 5. Have you seen any crossover between Scientology and MAGA? Scientology is in the cult of Trump. They were donators. Trump just pardoned a Scientologist whale named David Gentili, who scammed tens of thousands of people out of $1.5 billion, was sentenced to 7 years in jail. And he pardoned this sucker after 7 days because he's in Scientology and because they gave him a lot of money, I bet. Trish Duggan is on the Kennedy Center board. I refuse to call it the Trump Center, the Kennedy Center board. So, but study Scientology and you'll understand a lot about brainwashing and mind control. I want to do a shout out for my friend and colleague John Atack, who wrote a book recently about the connections between the Nazis and the occult and Hubbard and Scientology. It's a fascinating book, thoroughly researched, all about the eugenics, how flawed the whole eugenics effort was of Hitler's occult people. And the Zorro Ranch apparently was a eugenics project. And if you didn't know that Elon Musk has 14 kids with 4 different women and wants more population of his own seed, this is Nazi crap. This is not okay. And I don't agree that his movements of his hand from his chest to the air was anything benign, because his parents have a history with Nazism. So there's lots to learn. Be curious, but also have fun. Listen to music. Go dancing. Listen to poetry. Let's see, there's a small thing on the screen. In the event that J.D. Vance becomes president, do you think he will get a lot of MAGA support? It's a very good question. Of course, he's the vice president, so he's next in line. I actually interviewed his cousin, Nikki McCarty, who has a Substack, a Christian nationalist. And if you don't remember, J.D. Vance said that Trump was Hitler before he flipped 180 degrees and became in the cult. We know Peter Thiel recruited J.D. Vance and funded him and got him put in the position of vice president. We know that Peter Thiel went to Rome to speak about the Antichrist recently. And he is a dangerous, dangerous billionaire, and his ideology is cultic. And if you haven't read Tech Agnostic, of an MIT Press book by Greg Epstein, check out my interview with Greg on this book. It's in Substack. It's on my YouTube channel. Because Greg names the ideology of these tech billionaires, the long-termism and transhumanism and accelerationism and crypto. All of these are bogus. I am so against crypto, which is different than digital currency that's linked to an actual financial regulatory system. And I want to do a shout out because I'm doing a live stream in a couple of days, Friday, the 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern with Gareth Gore, who I interviewed when his incredibly important book, Opus, came out, about Opus Dei. I put Opus Dei in the cult of Trump as one of the puppeteers over Donald Trump. They're the people who put together and funded the Federalist Society and Leonard Leo and the hacking of our Supreme Court and Heritage Foundation Project 2025. Opus Dei. So anyway, Gareth Gore just met with the Pope on Monday. and presented the Pope his book, and they talked about all of the criminal activities of Opus Dei. So it was amazing, and I asked Gareth a few weeks ago, please do a live stream with me, and he said, don't tell anyone, but I'm meeting with the Pope. So it would be good to do it a few days later. I'll have lots to share. So Gareth has a Substack you can read about his initial comments. Come join us on Friday. And if you are on social media and you like certain podcasters or whatever, tell them to have me on. Tell them to read The Cult of Trump. If you're a follower of Joe Rogan, contact him. Say, hey, you had Steve Hassan on in 2015. You seem to be realizing that Trump is a liar and a predator and a bad person. Why don't you have Steve on and let him, ask him questions? Okay, so let's see. Question, is the narrative of legitimacy of LGBTQ the same paradigm as of cults, religions, political groups? Is the narrative of legitimacy the same paradigm as cults, religions, and political groups? I'm not sure if I understand this, but I do want to state categorically that I am pro-human rights, which means gay rights, women's rights, trans rights, indigenous rights, rights of minority religions, and that the attack on trans is largely from Christian right-wing nationalists who are homophobic, and they're using the trans issue as a spear to go after and try to undo gay marriage, and the reality that there have always been gay people and non-binary people throughout history. In fact, they're some of the biggest inventors and innovators in human history. Let's see, Sherry Beth on Substack, is there anything we can do to help someone get into a better place to be open to a family member who refused to listen to warnings about their vote for Trump and how their vote hurt their LGBT family? I really think my best advice is be strategic. And what I mean by that is know what your goal is. The goal is to empower people to think for themselves, to reality test, to be able to discern the difference between an ethical group, an ethical leader, an ethical relationship, and an authoritarian one. That's what my influence continuum is all about. It gives a framework for how to reality test. And so telling people that you hurt me because you said X, Y, or Z, you undermined my identity as a human being, that's not going to get progress in a very real way. And if it's going to happen, it should be done in family therapy with a safety, with sets of rules, etc., where people are taking turns sharing their perspective. And I want to share a very powerful technique called counter-attitudinal argumentation. And basically what that means is step into the other person's shoes and argue as if you were them. Because if you can do that and do it accurately, where the person says, yep, you really got it, what social psychology has demonstrated is it changes the person's perspective. It shifts it because you're creating an empathetic channel with the neurons to be able to look at reality from another point of view. People say and do things all the time that hurt our feelings, that we feel assaulted on our identity. I can't tell you, in 1976, when I left the Moonies and I decided to become a whistleblower and I started doing interviews, universally, people talked to me like there was something wrong with me. Like, how could you have ever believed this, Steve? There must be something wrong with you. You must be stupid, uneducated. They have all these rational presuppositions that were all wrong. They didn't understand. I didn't knowingly choose to become a right-wing fascist. My girlfriend dumped me. Women lied to me and flirted with me. And I was systematically recruited and indoctrinated into this new mind control system. Let's give each other space to grow and change. I have a fascinating guest for next week's podcast, Bill Eddy, who has written books. He has an institute, the High Conflict Institute. He's written a book about Trump. Highly recommend it. I really loved his work. Let's see, we've got a few more minutes. Dr. Hassan, does extreme wealth induce a sort of psychosis and antisocial behavior in otherwise normal people? How can we address that in society? It's a good question. I don't have extreme wealth, so I can't talk about it from a first-hand point of view. But I can tell you a lot of very wealthy people who are very poor growing up forget their roots. They didn't like their childhood, and they struggled to become a different person, make a fortune, and they somehow believed that if they have the fancy houses, the fancy cars, the planes, etc., that will make them a valuable human being, when what they were missing was real love and security and safety in the first place. By the way, another thing that I oppose, and I'm sure there'll be folks on the progressive left who will not like what I'm about to say, but I think it's a big mistake to demonize wealthy people and say it's the oppressors and the people, and everyone who's an oppressor is evil. And it's this binary all or nothing, black and white, good versus evil thing. And it's just, what Russia wants and China wants is for us to fight and distrust each other. We don't have a chance to throw off the 60 billionaires who are aligned publicly with Trump without the 260 odd billionaires who aren't aligned with Trump. We need billionaires to realize if they want a future for their children, their grandchildren, for their legacy, they have to not be complicit or silent. They need to invest a lot of their resources in people who actually have ideas, practical, strategic ideas that are going to make a difference. So I'm just against anybody simplifying people into categories. And I don't think it makes you an evil person if you have a lot of money. And I don't think you should wait to do philanthropy if you have things that can help feed people now. Like, I love when I see posts about famous wealthy people who are working in soup kitchens, who are living in small middle-class homes intentionally and giving their money to help others. And there are ethical, healthy ways to help others and bad ways to help others. Like, I'm a big believer in empowering people, teaching them how to fish as opposed to giving them a fish, helping them have their own sewing machine or whatever. If we're talking about rural countries, getting them a cow, getting them chickens, whatever. Anyway, it's not my expertise, but when Trump and Musk gutted USAID, China rushed in, and it just undercut America's position in the world. That isn't to say that USAID hasn't wasted a lot of money and given money to dictatorships when it wasn't being spent properly. Probably was. Let's see, Jenny Benjamin on Substack. Gareth Gore just met with the Pope Leo about Opus Dei. You missed what I just said about 10 minutes ago, Jenny. We have a live stream Friday with Gareth Gore, 2 p.m. Eastern. And if you haven't seen my interview with Gareth, because I've counseled people in Opus Dei, I've known about them as a mind control authoritarian cult for a really long time, have the bite model filled out for Opus Dei. Come and join us on Friday, and we can ask Gareth questions about Opus Dei. But if you haven't read his book, Opus, get it. And I believe it's on audio. It's in Spanish and a number of languages. Let's see, Andrew, what do you think the involvement of the Council of National Policy and Knights of Malta's involvement is in the Iran war since they were in bed with Russia? So I learned about the Council of National Policy from Ann Nelson, who wrote the very important book Shadow Network. I learned about this private billionaire right-wing or think tank organizer. They've been plotting the destruction of the United States for decades. And they put the founding editor, James Whelan, into the Moonies, my former cult's newspaper, the Washington Times, like almost 50 years ago. And if you didn't catch my interview with David Lipsky, who wrote a book that was very scholarly on climate science denial, he said the Moonies have been the single biggest propaganda arm for fossil fuel companies and corporations and countries in the world. So what do I think about the Council of National Policy? I think they're up to the cult of Trump to their necks. I don't know about the Knights of Malta. I've heard their expression. I have yet to read a book or be educated about them in any real way. But understand what's happening today has been a project for 50 years. I was literally in the room with Sun Myung Moon in 1974 when he said, we're going to infiltrate the government. God thinks democracy is satanic. God wants a theocracy. So, and I believed it. I really believe Moon was the Messiah, that he was chosen by Jesus to fulfill God's mission, to have sinless children. He's the guy with the mass weddings. And I was a true believer. But I'm telling you, when I woke up and I understood my mind had been brainwashed, I was never going to go back to the Moonies, and I felt obligated to speak out. And I became a whistleblower for a congressional subcommittee investigation into the Korean CIA activities in the U.S. So if you wanted to have another conversation about MK Ultra and psychological warfare that the U.S. has been involved with, start by reading Combating Cult Mind Control. And I want to invite you to please come become a subscriber for my Substack, Stephen Hassan, and my YouTube channel, Dr. Stephen Hassan. I have a wealth of fascinating things to learn about and to share. And if you want to help the project of freedom of mind, do something to share with your Facebook friends or people in your temple or in your church or in your mosque, and learn about the difference between ethical influence, ethical religion, and authoritarian mind control cults. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank Jerry and Cami for your assistance, and I'll see you on my live stream Friday with Gareth Gore about Opus Dei. Take care.